After the long, drawn out summoning ceremony, plus the subsequent fun we had during the ceremony and everything afterwards, I was just happy to get back to the house. As we reach the front door, Jake is looking forward to seeing his golem, which is expected. He's finally figured out on which name to call it, and when he does, the residence shall be complete. It's going to hit him like a brick, no pun intended. Golems are one of the only summons that this happens to, where it hits so hard. Though I do remember a slight resonance bump when I actually named Scarlet. But before I can even think about anything, before the key can even touch the lap, Father stops cold. I look, and there it is. The door, barely ajar, though I distinctly remember him turning and locking it. He's paranoid about that sort of thing. Father immediately reaches underneath his jacket and draws his weapon, something that frightens Jake as he hadn't even realized that Father carried one. He motioned a little bit, and the projectile's mechanism clicked into place, and I was suddenly reminded about the fact that you don't actually require magic in this world. No, science is still a thing. Thanks to my work, I'd actually started carrying a blade, a fairly large blade, twice as long as my hands, and I moved my arm down and pulled it out as its sheath was right above my shoe. I drew it as well the same time Father drew his weapon, flipping the blade around as Father and I walked inside. We began to search the house as Jake, Mother, and Scarlet backed away from the door and waited outside. As we searched the first floor, we moved silently. We could have snuck up on a mouse, we were moving so cautious. Something that seems to me as though I had practiced this before, as though I had drilled doing the same thing to the point where my muscles remember how to move, as though I practiced until I could not get it wrong if I tried. We checked everywhere on the first floor, every closet, every space that seems to be hidden from view when we walk in the door. Then we head upstairs. As quiet as I can, following Father up the stairs, we move. Father still not happy that I joined him, as he kept giving me an odd look, almost waving at me to tell me to go back, but we continued. We checked the master bedroom and his bathroom next to it, and clear my room, clear the other bathroom. Everything's clear. The hallway closet is even clear. The last room is Jake's room. As we approach, we could hear something. Father put his hand on the door handle, silently controlled it down a little bit, and then looked at me and counted down, giving me a 1, 2, 3. And at that point, we rushed through the door, and we could see a man on the floor with his chest crushed in. Another is still trying to get clear of the huge stone stumps. These were the ends of the golem's arms, currently holding the man up against the wall by his throat, feet dangling in the air as though kicking enough was going to get him loose. It was clear that he was stuck right there by the golem. His pulse weapon is sitting there, broken on the ground. Father and I began to come down off our adrenaline dump, and we looked at the sight and actually began to laugh. We knew what this man is and what he was trying to do. Instead of asking the golem to release him, we left, and Father opened up the wall compartment and contacted the authorities. They were very quick to arrive once we told them what was going on. At first, they were professional when they walked in. That is until they saw the golem had actually pegged the man to the wall, and he wasn't going anywhere. With this, they lost much of their professional demeanor. It wasn't long before Jake and the others could finally enter the house. We had to wait until the remains of the first summons stealers had actually been removed. We didn't want Jake to actually see this, and the golem had actually crushed that man's chest with enough force that it was as though his heart and everything around it had been liquefied. Very few creatures could actually survive such an attack. Demons are one, of course, as they don't require a heart to even survive. In fact, even vampires, as you simply have to contain them for a long enough period of time where their mana simply runs out. Incubus are another one where if you crush their heart, it wouldn't matter, as they have a second heart that's actually down by their pelvis. This one's mainly to assure proper blood flow is constant and solid, and yeah. Once the body was removed, we hesitantly removed all bloody blankets, rugs, furniture, and everywhere else that got, well, splattered. Only then could we allow Jake into his room. He arrived, looked around, and did the same thing we did. He congratulated his golem on a job well done, even giving the golem a hug, and the golem just didn't move. He had to order the golem to release the man, and the man actually fell to the ground with a solid thud. The constables who were staying there quickly took the man away, and they were not exactly nice about it. In fact, this was a hangable offense. After all this calmed down, everyone in the family went into the entertaining room so that we could talk. First, Jake would stay in my room until a full cleansing was performed in his room. No one argued that, to include myself or Scarlet. Second, Jake wanted to actually share the name of his golem, which I swear as I look at it, that thing has actually changed shape since this morning. Jake stood in front of the golem and placed his hands towards it, and he said, "Your name is Gold, as you are precious to me more than anything else." I tried not to roll my eyes, as I thought that was a bit sappy, but Mother and Scarlet actually started to cry, saying how sweet that was. I wanted to visually shudder and cringe, but something else began to draw my attention. Gold began to change. Change a lot. The once blunt limbs of the arms and legs began to form. They gained definition, almost like muscle tone, it seemed like. The ends began to form hands and feet. We watched in stunned silence as the ends formed full fingers and thumbs, feet and toes, even. The legs became sleek and defined and was changing into a more V shape, almost like a man at first. Then, some obvious protrusions started to develop through the front. These were shaped correctly, but they were completely smooth, as in stone memories. The abdomen started to tone itself up as though it is someone who had worked hard to make sure the abdominal was completely flat. As I looked towards its back, it seemed as though the back was the same way, with a whole bunch of strong definition. The head began to change, and I watched closely, in silence like the rest, as a very feminine face began to form. The top of the hair did not grow hair, but it morphed into a hair-like style of stone, similar to our neighbor, I thought. That is when I noticed the face. I analyzed it as it changed. It looked as a mix of our neighbor, a single middle-aged woman that lives next to us. It also kind of looks like Scarlet, and Marlene's mother, and Marlene herself. This was confusing, of course, if you didn't think about it for long, that is. That is when I noticed that the golem was a little mixed up elsewhere. As I had noticed before, as I walk around parts changing, I noticed that I had no idea that a woman's chest is not actually smooth like that. There are additional protrusions. As I moved around during all this forming, I noticed that the backside, the posterior, was also formed as though it was extremely strong. As I ran around towards the front to make sure everything was good, I actually breathed a sigh of relief, as all this was done via his subconscious, and at least his subconscious understands that the downstairs mix-up for a body shaped like this is an innie, not an outie. When Gold finally finished changing, I looked over at Jake, who was still standing there amazed at what he had just saw, but I noticed his arms as well. For a 5-year-old, he isn't supposed to have definition in his arms like that. Father is the first one to speak as he says, "Looking good, Gold." Jake quickly turned his head and he said, "Goldie. She says her name's Goldie." That monotone that came out was rather unsettling, but it's normal for someone to be protective of their summons. I tried to break a little bit of the tension by asking Mother if she had any clothing that might fit Goldie there. She mentioned she might, but I can see she's a little put back that Goldie's chest is a bit more, just a bit more than hers. I happen to notice Scarlet also being a little self conscious in that area too. Scarlet softly said, "I'm still growing." I didn't even really hear her, and when I asked her if she was all right, I didn't understand the issue. That is until she crossed her arms in front of her chest. I gave her a hug to comfort her and let her know that I know she's going to develop, and when she does, she will be even more attractive. After I said this, I had to stifle a chuckle because I realized she was being so self conscious over something that was a non issue. Yet I also breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that it's a really good thing that Jake had decided to share the bath several times with Scarlet. I could only imagine the look of a familiar with a woman's face and most of her body, but having something else sprouted from the base of the torso. After all that excitement, Goldie now had a altered dress, which was going to need more attention due to her size. Mother does not actually stand that tall either, and the skirt is a bit short. I realized that if she was going to walk outside, she needs something else because one quick breeze and she's going to surprise the living crap out of everybody. All that aside, before I actually stood in front of the family, I assured that the windows were completely covered, and I informed the family that my summons had actually been successful, despite the fact that nobody saw it. They all looked confused, as I explained that my second summoned creature was more ethereal than physical. Hearing this, Father almost jumped out of his chair, saying that this could assure myself as a mage position if it's what he thought. I had to calm him down by mentioning that I'm not sure this summons will remain. He was confused as everyone else. That's when I told them it'd be a whole lot easier if I showed them than just told them. I removed my shirt and allowed the power to actually flow out of me. They all watched as my chest began to glow brighter and brighter, bringing my hands forward towards my chest and form them as though I'm trying to carry water with my hands. I could see and feel the power begin to flow in my torso, and at that point, a tiny little light seemed to chop out and land in my hands. It landed right there in the center of my hands, and they all looked as a baby bird that seemed to look up at them. A baby bird that looked like it was on fire. A freshly born, not reborn, phoenix was right in front of them, and they were amazed. It looked up at them with the same wonder as a child, constantly tilting its head as birds do. Its body appears to be a simple flame, smoldering almost, as they simply observe. From its tail, they can see there is a single string of light, not a beam, but a string. I explain this that the phoenix has actually tethered itself to my soul. It had read my mind and only had a moment to make a decision while the summoning was happening. It could have decided to stay outside the body, basically perch itself on my shoulder and still tether itself. But if it had stayed outside of the body, the phoenix itself would have been taken and placed in a gilded cage with me. Mother heard this and said, "You mean gilded?" I simply responded, "No, I do not." because they would have me by the balls, constantly monitored, constantly controlled, a complete prisoner for my entire life, which is no life at all. You understand this. They all nodded understandingly. Father asked me what my plan was going to be moving forward, if I was going to put in applications or anything like that, and I answered that I would simply be returning to work. That way I would have time to think about the next big step. Besides, I need to learn more, to understand more, to test more, to become more before I end up being some government experiment or worse, just another one of their lapdogs. Before going any further in the conversation, my folks both asked me if I was actually willing to harbor a creature inside my body. What would this phoenix think of all this, of being inside, being held up, just being part of me? That's when I raised my hands and said, "Why don't you ask?" The little bird actually looked at them dead on and said,
I made a choice.
before turning around and basically popping back inside my chest. That felt weird, I wouldn't lie, as it was like the yellow bird was inside, settling into my heart as though it's a nest. A minute later, when I referred to the little bird in my chest as Blaze, I could feel the resonance begin to flow through my body. Not just flowing in from the surface or flowing in from the ether, but seeming coming out from my chest, building up. Suddenly I was hot. Very, very hot. Scarlet saw me sweating and immediately came over. She could feel the heat and mentioned how hot my body was. Mother came over and checked me and immediately told Father to prepare a cold bath. He bolted upstairs to fill the tub, and I began to feel even hotter. Whew. Sweat beads began to run down all parts of my body. Scarlet was freaking out as my robe began to soak all the way through. Mother tried to pick me up, but I am a bit too heavy and at that point just slippery. The robe basically sliding off me didn't help, and Scarlet began to pull it off to help my body simply air out. I didn't realize it first until they mentioned it, but steam was now rising from my skin. As Mother asked for Goldie to take me upstairs, Goldie didn't move at first, but Jake told her to move. She lifted me up without hesitation, and pain was starting to get to me. So much so that I could feel tears welling up in my eyes. Mother saw this and held me close as we reached the bathroom, trying to comfort me. That is when tears made their way out of me and onto Mother's skin. The burst of light radiated from her skin as soon as the liquid touched her. The light shimmered down her body like a ripple of stone makes when thrown into the water. Mother stood in shock as the light traveled down her entire body. We could all see the light through her clothes. Father even tried to stop this. He was worried. He didn't know what was going on. He began to rip away at her clothes out of sheer instinct, trying to get a hold of this, and the light permeated across his hand as though the tear itself had smeared across his hand, and then it started to go down his body as well. As they began to remove clothing to follow the light, Scarlet began yelling at Golding to place me in the tub. At this point, I had actually stopped sweating. This is bad. Really, really bad. Seeing this, Scarlet yelled at Goldie to place me down in the water, which she did, and the water actually began to steam. Not because the water had been hot, no, but because the heat radiating off my body actually warmed up the water that fast. As the heat radiated into the water via conduction, Mother and Father were both nearly undressed, following the light as it charged down them in all different directions. The muscle tone of Father suddenly began to return. The scars from his mining accident, they're fading away. The few gray hairs that he had were suddenly gone. Did they fall out? Did they change color? I looked over, and Mother's body had already started to change as well. She had gotten thinner, more taut. She was mostly exposed at this point because she didn't know what was going on, and I could see her body continue to change. Her chest became more aesthetically pleasing as it pulled itself a little bit higher and closer to her chest. The mark on her abdomen faded away, and even a small amount of gray that she did have was just gone. Jake was in there as well, right next to Goldie, and he was frozen in place as his 5-year-old mind actually tried to rationalize what was going on, and he was coming up completely empty. He had seen this wave of energy go over them, but he had no understanding of how or why any of this was happening. Scarlett had been so worried about me that she had actually jumped into the tub to hold on to me. She kept looking me over and making sure I didn't pass out as I was slowly able to cool down. Thanks to the heat, I was a bit out of my mind at that point and couldn't answer any of her questions, even though I could look around. I could move my eyes, just not much else. Eventually, I was able to move just enough where I could wrap my arms around her, pull her close so I could whisper in her ear, "I am undamaged. Worry not." I know what had just happened, but I was completely unprepared for it. What had happened was resonance. Since I gave Blaze the name, the resonance just pulsed to the surface. I was beginning to understand it as both father and mother asked, "Would you care to consider informing the family about what just occurred?" Getting more of my senses back, I informed them of the resonance of this summons. And because this is a phoenix, the resonance is strong, very strong. The energy that they experience is the legendary Phoenix Tears. The resonance could not be complete until this happened, and Blaze actually had to hurt me a lot to get it out, as his power just kept growing and growing and growing until I teared up. To demonstrate this power, it simply rubbed on her, to show why exposing this power would actually place us in chains. Every politician or wealthy person would demand it for themselves. Both father and mother seem to understand this now, and I informed them that they are not the only ones affected. The one that mother carries has also been affected. I could feel it. I could sense it. They are now in absolutely perfect health. As they celebrated the fact that they had both returned to peak physical condition, I asked them to both to leave, as their exposed forms were making me a bit uncomfortable. They left, of course, but I stayed put, mainly as I was far too tired to even move. Hell, I could barely even speak. Jake left with Goldie, and Scarlett just stayed with me. She kept putting her hand on my chest as though to pet Blaze a little bit, to say hi or thank you or whatever she was trying to do, but she didn't speak. I asked her to stop caressing my chest, but as soon as she stopped, I passed out. I woke still in the tub with Scarlett asleep on my chest. At least this time I wasn't actually laying down while she's laying on my chest, but still, why does she do that? Crawling out, Scarlett kept holding on to me, whispering something about so warm. I had to go, however. Firstly, because I didn't want to piss in the tub. Secondly, because I was beyond thirsty and I'm not going to drink my bath water. As I stood up, I noticed my reflection though. When did my body mature this much? And when was I so thin? There was also my muscles are larger and more defined. All of them. I might have admired the sight a little bit more if my tongue wasn't dragging on the ground from the thirst and my eyes were not turning yellow because I had to relieve myself so much. After relieving myself, I pulled Scarlett actually out of the tub and carried her to my room. Jake was asleep on my bed, which I didn't mind considering what had just happened to his room. with Goldie simply standing there, keeping watch. I simply said, "Hi," to Goldie, but she didn't move. As I walked past, I grabbed all the different water that I had in the room, a couple of cups that I had left over, and I drank them as fast as possible. I then placed Scarlet down and grabbed a blanket that I could dry her off with and covered her with a dry one. Then I put on some fresh clothes and I headed downstairs. Reaching the base of the stairs, Mother saw me and wished me a good afternoon, which is when I finally noticed what time it was. And she was all smiles as she watched me put several liters of water into my body before proceeding to gorge myself on her cooking. Like shoveling coal into a fire, I felt my body gain its energy levels back over time. Looking at the time, I would have to leave for work fairly soon. I thanked Mother for the meal, of course, and she thanked me too. When I asked her what for, she said she had not felt so wonderful in over a decade. It was like when she had first gotten married. Then she grinned a little bit before I said, "Father's as well, I'm sure," struggling for my words a little bit. As we talked, a sleepy Scarlet joined us downstairs. She ate, and before leaving the table, Mother gave us both a big hug. A hug that seemed to last a little bit long. Oh, damn, I thought to myself as I realized far too late Scarlet's resonance, compounded with mine, was making Mother's body do things. I don't know if she realized it, but yes, I had to immediately break away. And to break the tension, I asked why Jake was still asleep. Then, as the words exited my mouth, I felt like the biggest fool for even asking. This is normal for a 5-year old that actually has such a powerful summons, and they need to rest for a long time as full resonance has finally kicked in. A golem, in particular, is a very, very strong summons, and very strong from the start, as it can never get weaker nor stronger, meaning his body is like resonating with a full grown scarlet or blaze. The magical backlash is taxing on the body, especially for one so young. Thankfully, being a fully physical summoned familiar, the stress is strictly on the body, not the mind nor the soul. Hence the reason I could barely move when I gave Blaze's name, or her name. The verdict for that one's not in yet. The stress on me was limited to in true physicality for sure, but it burned into my soul and even a bit into my mind. I will not be able to use any magic until I fully recover from this, and hopefully that's not going to be an issue at work though. When Skylar and I got to work, everyone was already briefed that I had a misfire. I hate lying, but I told them that I wouldn't be able to use any of my residents for a while, not for at least a week. They were all sympathetic, of course, but that didn't stop laundry from needing to be collected, maintenance from being done, my lessons from needing being completion, and of course, my combat training. As I worked, the resident from Scarlet kept me moving and moving quick. We both had realized a long time ago that we pick up residual energy from the customers, even from some of the entertainers, especially when I'm walking through the employee hallway, where the energy is being expelled every single time I pass a door every 15 feet. And, well, let's just say the energy radiates out and my body automatically picks it up. This is something Blaze likes too, as the influx of energy makes it easy for him to adjust what he must. This speeds up my recovery as well, and it's a long night for sure. Yet, I'm not tired. During my lessons, I'm even more focused than before, as though I'm an even younger child, just soaking up information like a sponge that has been dehydrated for a week and now just got tossed into a lake. The biggest surprise was in my combat training. My instructor was surprised that I could recover from strikes and throws so quickly. Scarlet watched like she always does, this time checking every time I bounced back from a hit, simply amazed as though nothing can hurt me. Yet I assured her, yep, that hurts. It was only a few more days after we had come back from the summoning, and the mistress wanted to see me. When I walked in, she got straight to the point. Olaf had actually stopped by, saying how he could create the greatest clothing, especially undergarments and intimate apparel. He used my name like I told him, which surprised everybody, of course. But he surprised everyone even more with not one, but two arachne with him. She wanted me to explain everything, and of course I did. Scarlet even jumped in and quickly pulled off her breeches to show to the mistress. I made a mental note to tell her later not to remove her panties so nonchalantly. As the mistress checked the fabric, I could see in her eyes that she was surprised at the quality. When Scarlet said, "You can't tear them. I tried." The mistress looked at me for confirmation, and I said, "You can try. It's not like she likes wearing the dang things anyway." Not only did she try, but her even sayer familiar tried too. Neither of them succeeded until the fabric was actually punctured by her familiar's horns, and even then, it was difficult to tear, even though it had already been pre-torn with a hole. I tried not to show it on my face, but seeing that happen, I knew I'd have to commission another set for Scarlet, though she was about to grow out of those anyway. She's growing really fast. The mistress said that she would consider a few samples, but she already had a seamstress or two or three or unknown how many. That is when something hit me. In my mind, I could see clothing that would be difficult for anyone to make outside of a full shop, at least for a seamstress. And even if they did it in a shop, the quality just might not be there compared to what Olaf can do. I offered to set up a design to test Olaf and his familiars. The mistress was intrigued and wanted to see. Drawing everything out, these consisted of 4 separate items. Well, I say 4, even though 2 are to be worn at the same time. I had to leave very detailed descriptions with the schematics that I drew, and when it was done, I simply went back to work. 2 days later, the slimy familiar, the mistress, was waiting for me. We followed it to the office, and I prepared myself to be terminated from my employment. As we walked in, I expected her to be behind her desk and angry at something. Instead, I turned to the side and saw that she was standing in front of a full-length mirror examining her new clothing. A sheer camisole that held her body in the way that accentuated her chest as it draped down her torso, all of which was sheer with the exception of the strap portions that held it together. As my eyes went down her body, I noticed that her ample bottom had actually enveloped the line of fabric that went between her cheeks, yet it could be seen arching high above her thighs on either side. On her legs were these stark white stockings that rolled all the way up to mid-thigh, the elasticity of the fabric holding them snugly in place. As she admired herself with this limited outfit, to say the least, she then noticed us standing there. Without taking her eyes off her own reflection, the mistress complimented Olaf and his familiars at such a wonderful craftsmanship. She mentioned how he was now fully hired, and how she believes that every single employee is likely to be visiting his shop when it opens. I was actually surprised that he would have the money for that. The mistress said, "With the amount of business he will be receiving from this establishment alone, he will have enough business for years at a time." I was questioning this, but the mistress, still enthralled with her own reflection, said she'll be showing off this new attire over the course of the night. Olaf himself is going to come back and will be arriving around the time me and Scarlet are leaving. When he arrives, she expects more commissions than he can handle. I actually smiled at this prospect, and so did Scarlet. That is, around the time the mistress mentioned a gift from Olaf, a kind of thank you for the opportunity. I looked over and there was a box, walked up and opened the box and kind of rolled my eyes for a second. And then I put the box down towards Scarlet, handed it to her, and said, I think it's for you. As I handed it to Scarlet, she looked inside, and inside was two sets of skivvies. Good thing, too, because she had already destroyed one, but not the style that you would expect for a 5-year-old girl. I figured she would actually hate the idea of undergarments the same style as the mistress, yet Scarlet almost pulled her own panties off right there to try the new ones off. After getting her to calm down, we looked at the other items. This one I actually like. A full white dress that I could easily drape over Scarlet. Thankfully, this one isn't sheer at all, or else I would be royally pissed, but it suits her very well. He had even designed it to fit over her wings with an opening to let her tail out. It was nice. She wanted to try them on right there, but I had to start work before everything got way behind. Before leaving, I asked the mistress if she could also show off Scarlet in her new clothes, as I was sure everyone would like to see the non intimate apparel as well. Of course, she agreed, and I left the two so I could go to work. I saw them a few times that night. Scarlet looked like a little angel next to the devil herself in that sheer camisole and thong. Scarlet kept turning to allow the dress to simply flow around her. This drew even more attention from the entertainers. Thankfully, the mistress had enough sense to keep Scarlet away from any of the customers, as she was just beautiful. We saw Olaf the next morning, and I informed him that he was about to actually have a very, very busy day. And of course, I thanked him for Scarlet's dress, as she was sitting there dancing around in it still. Scarlet gave the arachne a huge hug and just kept saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, and how she just loves the dress. On the way home, Scarlet continued to show off to everyone and even showed Mother and Father when we got back. Mother was interested in some of the new undergarments as well, a statement that actually raised my father's face from his daily notifications, something that almost never, ever happens, although I also saw his eyebrows raise as well. It was a good thing I remembered there is a code. If you notice something like that, pretend not to notice. That is how the nights usually went. Scarlet waiting to see all the new clothing. She just loved new clothes, but what girl doesn't? Then she would get her lessons while I went to work. We would eat together when it was time to eat. I received my lessons, perform at least half a dozen massages a night so I could power up the intimate drives of several of the employees. Then there was fun combat training. Polish off work, Scarlet and I would talk to Olaf for sometimes just a minute, sometimes just saying hi, which is where I received news about Lisa. And after our interaction, we headed to pick up breakfast on our way home. When we got home, it's breakfast, a bit of conversation. Maybe Scarlet and Jake would play with Goldie or something. Then it's time to take a bath and go to sleep, because by then you're just exhausted. And then you wake up just in time to do it all over again. This may all seem rather monotonous, and it is, but there's always something new happening. Like a new employee that tries to get special treatment by offering special treatment. That makes me laugh as I simply tell her I have to get back to work. Some new piece of equipment that I have to learn, as magic itself is pretty much everywhere, but it is limited. One would think that with magic you could just fix everything with it, do anything with it, but as we all know, the magic is specialized based to whichever summons you have. There's always some customer that demands something free as well. There's sometimes they can't afford anything, they get mad. They demand a refund because they were so excited that they were over and done with before they even started. Then, of course, there's a spouse that comes in, male or female, doesn't matter, arriving to drag the other spouse out, sometimes just to pick a fight for some reason, which means I can actually put my combat training to the test and get some real world experience. I never tell them that I'm actually getting stronger every day thanks to my familiars. I also get to watch my girl grow up, which above all else is the most important thing I have. Don't tell Blaze, though. The biggest event that actually happened in those 5 years was when the Knights Academy students decide they want to take advantage of the situation of them being Knight students. All of them show up drunk, all dirty like they had just come out of the field, all of them looking for entertainment. At least half trying to bring their familiars inside for reasons. Yet a suddenly locked door will usually get them to calm down a little bit, especially when you say how if they start trashing the place, they are in some serious, serious crap. Even though they did get inside the doors once they sent their familiars away, of course, it didn't stop them from just going crazy. Drinking anything liquid, even stealing from others who were there just to hang out, getting handsy with the entertainers, and even though we warned them, even though we were able to knock them away, it just kept getting worse and worse. It came to a head very quickly as a couple tried to push to the back rooms. Since Scarlet is back there, I will not let them pass. And I told them no. But all they did was look down, and they thought all they saw was a 14-year-old kid. Well, this kid has a few tricks up his sleeve. I knew intoxication means they can't focus any magic and power. I would use this to my advantage beyond everything else. Focusing all my resonance into my fist, a solid strike to the abdomen of the first one had him backing up in pain, then dropping to his knees as he yelled and cursed, but as soon as he was on his knees, he proceeded to violently and continuously ejaculate in his pants as I screamed at him, "You shall not pass here." Seeing this, several of them came up to face me in a fury of punches and kicks. I deflected as many as I could, countering with the hardest strikes I could after so many years of hard work. Work that was performed mainly at a run. Hard work, carrying heavy devices and moving things around that I could recover from in moments, meaning I was much, much stronger than I look. At this point, I do not look weak either. With every strike, I can cause significant damage as well as focusing the pain into something else. Something rather embarrassing for anyone who tries to walk. As they begin to overwhelm me completely and begin to stomp me into the ground, I'm barely able to get up as a blast of fire stretches across the room, followed by a cold that is more than enough to harden the nipples and start everyone shivering. They went from sweaty to below freezing. Everyone's frozen. As I get to my feet, I can see Roxanne standing on her salamander. It was now so big, she actually does have to stand on its back as it's way too wide. The salamander begins snapping its jaws at anyone who even tries to approach. She screams about how all of them are going to be on report, how they can get themselves kicked out of the Knights Academy for any of this. Those that could still stand try to plead their case as actual knights arrive to arrest the cadets. As the knights arrive, all of them sober, all of them fresh, and all of them ready to beat some ass, the cadets simply surrender. As the cadets get dragged out, the knights are disgusted, not just at the behavior, but from the fact that about half of them are, shall we say, running dry, as they had emptied themselves inside their trousers with such force that they're barely able to move. Each one led out with their hands behind their back, with their face towards the crowds watching, and each of those in the crowd would notice, as it was impossible not to notice, There were many snickers, many laughs, many comments that made these cadets lower their heads very far. As these cadets are being let out, I address Roxanne. I grin a little bit as she has come so far from the shy little tiefling that I knew. Yet she goes from confident to shy once again, brushing her hair past her ear as she looks down and asks if I'm all right. She even jumps down. We talk for barely a moment as one of the entertainers comes up and asks if I'm injured, also mentioning how they could actually use a medic. I was going to have to excuse myself, but before Roxanne left, I mentioned the clothing, and I asked if she had talked to Olaf in a while. She mentioned that she had not, so I told her that if she needs new clothing for herself or her familiar, she could just go see him. That is when Scarlet actually arrived and ran up to the salamander and gave it a big old hug right on the snout. It actually proceeded to lick her once and gave a calming sound as though it's simply giddy at seeing her. That was the time where the little snow girl came down off the top of the salamander to see Scarlet. Seeing Scarlet's dress, I mentioned Olaf again, and I could see the confirmation in not only her eyes, but her familiar, which she had not told me her name yet. I unfortunately had to leave fairly soon, as I had to treat more of the injured, not to mention it's going to be a long night. I now have a really big mess to clean up. That was the last time I saw Roxanne until our final ceremony. I'm sure at that point she thought less of me, realizing that the rumors were true. I do work at that place. Yet there's something about her actions, something I didn't understand, but when I told Scarlet about it, Scarlet actually turned to me and called me a moron. It wasn't until I told the story and inquired about this by my instructor when I asked, "What may I be observing and not comprehending?" All the ladies who heard the story and me ask this question simply rolled their eyes and once again called me a moron. When I finally said, "Will you just explain it to me and stop just giving me insult?" they finally spelled it out, broke it down Barney style. Although, when I said break it down Barney style, they all looked at me weird and I didn't even know where those words came from. Then I asked them to be slow and get it into my head. By the time they were done explaining, I realized they were right. I was a moron. My instructor congratulated me on a job well done in protecting the facility when I told him I was actually protecting Scarlet above all else. He smiled wide. Okay, now I'm worried. Last time he smiled like that, he was getting ready to punch me in the face. For another year, I worked, saving my coins, helping the family, training myself, training my brother, and soon my little sister will be old enough to be trained as well. I learned as much as I can while still being able to watch Scarlet grow. I look at her now. She's nearly 10 now, and I can tell she's going to be an absolute gorgeous beauty. Which is why, a few days ago, I actually looked at my combat trainer and asked him to show me something. Where can I purchase a shotgun? Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on this continuing story that comes out once a week. Now, before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Chris Dixon. And I also need to send out some special thank yous to the supporters of this channel, and they are Prozac and Pancakes, SS Demon, Brian Kemp, MTF Guard, Julius Boone, Douglas Scarborough, Erica Gem, Guardian Sage, and Sir. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax.
Ejecting!